So the user will press the run button on the code, and doing so would display the GUI. The fields are already set to false, which neutralizes the GUI and allows the user to manipulate the way it wants. Next, the user will press the load button. We use the command, which allows the user to open an MP4 file. If it doesn't enter an MP4 file, then an error message will be displayed. If it is, the video information, as long as the extracted file, will be displayed on the GUI. Next, the user will press the play button, and doing so will cause a switch case statement that we use in our code to make the play button turn into the pause. This part of the code is for the functionality of the load button. We use the command UIGetFile to allow the user to select an MP4 file from their files on their computer. If an incorrect file is selected, an error message will display. If not, the function video reader holds on to the information from the file. We then use strings and tags in order to display the duration, frame rate, resolution, and name of the file. This code is for the play pause functionality. We use switch case statements in order to control this. When case is 0, there's no video playing, but when case is 1, playback occurs. So if the video is playing and the play pause button is pushed, the code will follow case 1 and play the video or pause the video. The text on the play pause button changes based on what the user presses. For case 0, there's a while loop running, and there's various if statements within it. These if statements get triggered when the user presses various buttons that are on the GUI, such as stop, step forward, step backward, and also the slider positioning.
So the stop functionality links back to the play button, and it starts at the beginning of the movie. And for the slider, it pauses the video and links back to the play button after moving the slider to wherever you want in the video, and links back to the play button, and the play button starts the video again. So when the stop button is pressed, the stop button triggers the stop conditional to turn true, which then sets the stop conditional back to false. Additionally, the video is then paused, and the now playing handle is set to 0, and the index handle is set to 1, causing the video to play from the first frame. Moving the slider by hand will turn the slider conditional to true, and which pauses the video and allows the user to jump to any part of the video they want. The rounded value of the slider is assigned to the frame index, and the video resumes once play is pushed again.
While the video is playing, the user has a number of options that they can press. So if they want to skip forward 10 frames, they can press the step forward button. Same thing for the step backward. The user wants to step backward 10 frames. This button is pressed. There's a number of special features that the user can also interact with while the video is playing. There's 3 different sliders. This is the hue slider, the brightness slider, and the saturation slider. And as the video is playing, the user can mess with the slider, moving it up or down to adjust the brightness, the saturation, and the hue slider. Another special feature that we have is the RGB histogram. That can be disabled by the disable RGB histogram button. And when this is pressed, the histogram is no longer showed. And same thing for the color correction button. When the disable color correction button is pressed, all of these sliders will be removed from the GUI. So this here is the hard code for the step forward and the step backward buttons. And what these conditional statements do is when the user presses the step forward button, it'll add 10 to the current frame index, which means that the current frame will be skipped ahead 10 frames. The same sort of logic is true for the backward. It'll subtract 10 from the current frame index, which means that the current index will be moved back. So this get function, it sort of takes the amount that the user has slid the slider. So the more it slides, the higher the value will be. And that function is what determines how much the image that is displayed where the video is being played is changed. So this here is the conditional statement that displays and updates the RGB histogram, and it only runs if the stop histogram field is set to false. But when it's false, this just takes all of the information for the red, green, and blue layers of the frame and displays it in the histogram command window. So this section of code here, this is responsible for the disable RGB button call. So when this button is pressed, stop histogram now becomes true. So the user will no longer be able to view the histogram in real time. So these functions here, these are all responsible for establishing the sliders on the GUI. These sliders are the hue, the saturation, and the value, which is really the brightness. And this function here can remove all of these if a certain conditional is met. So if stop color correct is true, all of these will be removed by this code here, which shuts all of these off and removes them. So this is the walkthrough video or video processor project. The code is displayed right here. I'm gonna go ahead and run it, and the GUI pops up. Now the first thing we need to do is load an MP4 file. So I'm gonna go ahead and click load. I'm gonna go to my downloads and load an MP4 file. And we know that it's been loaded when the information about video displays the name, resolution, frame rate, and duration of the video. So once that's there, we can go ahead and press play. And the video begins playing. It's a bit slow because it's at about 60 frames per second, but it's still playing. There's a number of buttons here. The first one is pause. We can go ahead and click that, and the video pauses. And we can click it again to play it, and the video will start playing again. There's also the step backward and step forward. So if we press step backward, it doesn't immediately do it, so it first starts off by pausing the frame, but when we press play, the step backward is executed and the frame is moved backward. Same thing with step forward. When we press step forward, the frame is paused, and then when we press play, the step forward is executed and the frame jumps forward. There's also the stop button, so when the video is playing, we can go ahead and press stop. The video frame is paused, and then when we press play again, the video is played from the beginning. So here we have the information. Here are our special features. This is the histogram, so it's updating the red, yellow, and blue layer information as the video goes on. We can disable this special feature by clicking this button, the disable RGB histogram button, and the histogram is no longer displayed. But we can go ahead and put it back on the display by just clicking the button one more time. And this is the second special feature where we have our brightness, saturation, and hue sliders. We can go ahead and play with the brightness by lowering it, and the image will become darker. And we can move it back up. We have the saturation, which we can move down, and the image will become more black and white. And then go back to color as I put it back up. And the hue, which does this weird color effect where the colors are sort of changed. And putting it back brings it back to its original. And then we can disable these sliders by clicking this button and they'll disappear, and then re-enable them by clicking the button again.